by a TWI member insurer that's affiliated with an agency that's paid commissions. Mr. Alexander is a property and casualty insurance consulting actuary. If any member of the committee is aware of any other disclosures that need to be made, please speak up. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. At this point, Chair has asked that I mention the TWI staff members who are participating in today's meeting. Those include David Durden, Jim Murphy, John Pollock, Jerry Fadden, Shu Lee, Amy Kale, Christina Donnelly, and Jennifer Armstrong. Also, in addition to the committee members named, we have on the line with us today our chair, Chandra Franklin Womack, board member Peggy Gonzalez, board member Mike Garrick, and also new board member Ron Walenta. Welcome, Mr. Walenta. And now I think Ms. Donnelly may have a few housekeeping words for the group.
Yes.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. We want to thank everyone who is joining us for this meeting of the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association Actuarial and Underwriting Committee. My name is Christina Donnelly, and I will be the technology moderator today because this meeting is being held virtually. I will also help facilitate the public comment section during the designated period on the meeting agenda. We are holding this meeting through Zoom and live streaming on YouTube. If you intend to make public comment for this meeting, you may only do so if you are logged in through Zoom or listening on a touch-tone telephone. You can find meeting materials, links to register for the Zoom meeting, or listen to the YouTube live stream at www.TWIA.org on our About Us page under Board Meetings. You may update your settings on your screen to view additional videos being shared during the meeting. While viewing the share screen, click on the View option and choose the side-by-side mode. Hover your pointer, over the boundary separator between the shared screen and participant video. Excuse me, one moment. Hover your pointer over the boundary separator between the shared screen and participants' videos until your pointer changes to a double arrow. Then you can click and drag that separator to adjust the view for each. Before we move forward in the agenda, I would like to provide participants of the meeting with a few reminders to help things run smoothly. If you're a committee or staff member participating in today's meeting, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Unmute it when you would like to speak. Keeping your microphone muted during the meeting helps to minimize disruptive feedback and background noise. Zoom will also give you a pop-up reminder if you attempt to speak while muted. You should also turn off all other technology on your computer, as other open programs and devices may interfere with the functioning of technology during the meeting. We also ask that you state your name when you speak so other participants and attendees of the meeting know who is talking. At this time, only members of the committee and association staff presenting to the committee have their microphones unmuted. If you are a registered attendee of the meeting, you'll remain muted for now. We will begin opening the meeting period for public comment in a few moments, during which I will go over the process of how to make public comment during the meeting. If at any time during the meeting you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can let staff know by emailing meetings@TWIA.org, and we will attempt to assist you. Please note that committee and staff members will not be able to respond during the meeting to comments or questions emailed to this address. I will now turn the meeting back over to the committee chair.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, committee members. Has everyone reviewed the minutes, and are there any comments or additions or changes to the minutes from September 22nd, our last meeting of September 22nd? None heard. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Hearing no corrections or additions to the minutes, I move they're approved as submitted.
Georgia, a second? Is there a second?
Steve Alexander, I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes as they stand?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Nope. Okay. Minutes are approved. Thank you. I would like to now turn it back to Christina to walk us through the public comment section. I believe there may be some people attending that want to make public comment.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to those of you that have joined today's meeting. If you've registered to attend the meeting through Zoom and would like to make public comment, please click on the hand raise icon. Click on the hand raise icon on the bottom of the Zoom control panel. The hand raise icon highlighted on the image on the slide shows how to find and select this button. You may also indicate you wish to make public comment via your touchtone telephone by pressing *9, then press *6 to activate your microphone when your name is called. If you have clicked on the hand raise icon, I will call your name and then unmute your audio so that you may give your public comment. The Zoom system will prompt you to unmute yourself. You will see your microphone icon become enabled to indicate that your microphone is unmuted. The committee chair has requested that public comment be limited to 3 minutes per person to allow time for everyone who wants to participate. As a reminder, if you're experiencing technical difficulties with making public comment, you can let staff know by emailing meetings@twiA.org. However, committee members and staff will not be able to respond to comments or questions emailed during the meeting. We are ready to begin the public comment period. You'll give me just a moment to review the attendees. The first person I am calling on is Representative Mays Middleton. Your microphone is now unmuted and you may make your public comment.
Well, thank you all for having me on today. I received the updated actuarial report, which is, over 100 pages just yesterday. So I think at this time it's inappropriate for this committee to recommend any rate changes with a report of that magnitude, and the public only having about 24 hours to review that. So obviously we're coming up on legislative session. It starts in about a month, actually, so I can't believe we're already there. And at this time, I think we need to wait on the legislature to weigh in on the obviously the actuarial soundness and actuarial fairness of Texas Windstorm Insurance Association. So we unfortunately did not get to the interim committee hearing, which we were supposed to have. And I think that's a whole nother reason that we need to not make any decisions today and allow the legislature to weigh the business that should have been done in the interim committee hearing that unfortunately we were not able to get to this past interim. So I appreciate y'all's time today, and I look forward to working with you next session.
Thank you, Representative Middleton. In just a moment to review the other hands that are raised. The next person I am calling on is Greg Smith. Your microphone is now unmuted and you may make your public comment.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, sir. It's a little bit far away. Can you speak once more?
Sure. I would like to thank the committee, Chairman King, for reviewing this. I would like to follow up with Representative Mays Middleton that we received the data too late to be able to give it a good look. We know with the legislature meeting on there, there could be substantial changes to the TWIA organization, particularly on reinsurance, that will affect any kind of actuarial indications as is. So as far as from Corpus Christi, that it's our preference that there's no action today on a rate increase until we wait for the Texas legislature to meet. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for your comment, Greg Smith. One more moment to review the listings here. The next person I am calling on is Sally Bacco, I believe. Apologies if I said that incorrectly. Your microphone is unmuted and you may now make your public comment. Sally, I'm calling on you for public comment. Your microphone is unmuted on my end. It looks like you probably have to click your unmute button, the little microphone icon, and it should open your microphone. Oh, looks like you did it. Click it one more time.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, thank you.
okay. Sorry about that. I'm Sally
No,
Bacco.
that's okay.
I'm Sally Bacco. I'm Director of Policy and Governmental Relations for the City of Galveston. I wanted to echo Representative Middleton's comments. We did submit our written comments on Wednesday, November 29th. The instruction at that time was written comments needed to be submitted by November 29th in order to be distributed in time for the committee members. The updated actuarial report, however, didn't even come out until noon yesterday. So our written comments that we submitted just simply expressed our concerns about this committee taking any action on a rate increase in light of the burdens on small businesses in Galveston and residents in Galveston due to the pandemic. We also, while not directly hit by hurricanes this season, our residents and businesses have been impacted by the high tides from Hurricane Laura and Delta and have been dealing with damage from those two events. And moreover, we strongly feel that the legislature did speak powerfully on examining the TWIA funding structure through HB 1900, and that process needs to have an opportunity to take place. And as Representative Middleton commented, the 87th legislature needs to have an opportunity to have further evaluation and voice on this. So we are urging this committee not to take action on a premium rate increase at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sally, for your public comment. Okay. The next person I am calling on is William Goldston. Your microphone is unmuted and you may make your public comment.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm William Goldston. I'm a longtime windstorm policy holder in Corpus Christi. A few months back, I've been under the understanding that currently you all are not imposing a rate increase. I was dissatisfied with the coverage I had on my homeowner's policy, so I worked with my insurance company and we had increased it a few $1,000s. That, of course, required a new quote from TWIA, and that quote had a 40% increase in the rate. So something's going on that isn't what I think I'm understanding is being done. Thank you for hearing me and best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldston, for your comment. Just one moment to review the listing. I do see one additional hand raised for Representative Hunter. Before we call on Representative Hunter, are there any other public commenters that would like to make public comment? Remember, you just click on the hand raise icon, and that would indicate to me that you would like to speak. Okay. Representative Hunter, I'm unmuting your microphone. You can now make your public comment.
Thank you all, and I appreciate being able to provide comment. Let me make two areas of observation. One, in connection with the new report in the Actuary Committee, you gave public notice of the public providing comment by Sunday, November 29th. Myself, as a legislator, did not receive the report till 2:30 November 30th. So I do think there is a problem procedurally, asking for public comment, and yet the report is produced a day later. So I would like you to take that into consideration as to no action. Second, yes, the public could make comments before the board meeting, but as previously indicated, this is a large report, and I think it needs more review than a week before action is taken. So I would request first, no action be taken by this committee as well as the board next week. Second, previously we provided a list of legislators, senators, and House members in excess of 20, requesting that no rate hike be taken in 2020. The legislature begins January 12th and will continue until the end of May 2021. We would request, as we indicated previously, that no action on rates be taken by the committee today or by the board, and that the legislature take up the rates legislatively when they begin in January. It's approximately about 6 weeks from now. So for those two areas, we would ask for your consideration, and we believe that this is an important topic that really needs legislative handling at this time, and that is the request. And if there is further information, you should contact any of us from the House and the Senate, as well as the executive legislative branches. That's all the public comment.
Thank you, Representative Hunter, for your public comment. Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment? Seeing none at this time, I want to thank everyone for their participation. I will now turn the meeting back over to the committee chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you all that spoke today, as well as I wanted to acknowledge the written public comment that we received from several out there. So we appreciate that as well. Now I would, we will turn it over to Willis Towers Watson to present to us their findings that on the data, mostly the data quality issues that were raised in the last meeting, September 22nd. There was discussion around secondary modifiers and how they impact the models and what that might do potentially regarding reinsurance purchases, the 1 in 100-year PML, and the rate indications. And there has been a tremendous amount of work done since that meeting by both TWIA staff and Willis to bring us to where we are today. So we will have a presentation from Willis. I hope you committee members or board members that are attending, please ask questions. We want to get as much understanding as possible about what we were able to get, as well as what we were not able to get, and potentially what that might mean. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Willis. Don't know who's speaking first, but.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. This is Alan Cashin. If we could just go to slide 2, do some quick intros from those that are going to speak at the Willis Towers Watson. So my name's Alan Cashin with Willis Re in Dallas, as well as Alicia Gertie is here on the broking side in Dallas. Jade Nguyen is a cat modeler in the Dallas office with Willis Re. and Prasad Gunturi is in Minneapolis on the cat modeling side as well. On the rate filing, ICT side within Willis Towers Watson is Lisa Suko and Jared Cable. So you'll hear from all of these folks throughout the presentation. So just if we just kind of talk about the timeline quickly, we did the RFP in early 2020. Seems like forever ago, but the selection was made. We delivered the report in September of this year. And like Debbie said, on the 22nd, the committee asked us to look at some data quality improvements. We felt like the data quality improvements would improve the rate indications and potentially lower reinsurance costs. So we delivered that report on a schedule that the committee and Willis Towers Watson agreed to. So the thesis behind this is TWIA has extremely valuable information about each property and historical properties as well. So whether that's WPI 8s or 12s, could be inspection reports, engineering reports, claims information. We've looked at some satellite imagery from Eagle View with the staff that was helpful. But the problem is all of this data was never included in the reinsurance marketing the program or rate indications in the past. So this observation of data quality, sorry, I'm just getting a little feedback. So this isn't the first time that that data quality has been introduced or discussed within TWIA. So we participated in a reinsurance RFP in 2016, and we noted that, on page 13 of that report, we noted that we can help Texas Windstorm access detailed information from various sources in order to improve data quality, reduce the PML, and ultimately reduce the cost of reinsurance. And I think, Ms. Neblett, who rightfully so at the time as well, post hurricanes, and I think it was after HB3, she also made the same comment that, she wanted to make sure insureds got these credits and so forth for repair and reconstruction. So like anything in today's world, data is priceless. Like I said earlier, these secondary modifiers weren't included in the rate indications or the reinsurance in the past. I'm not sure if those involved, including the reinsurance broker, fully understood the financial impact of all of this data. But with the help of staff, and I will call out Jim Murphy, who was absolutely invaluable in this exercise. We made significant progress in the last 43 days since that meeting to save $12.2 million in reinsurance costs for Texas Windstorm. That's on an annual basis. Let me just say that without changing anything as far as modeling assumptions, it's just taking the data that we captured over the last 43 days and putting it into the cat model. That exercise alone will save $12.2 million in reinsurance costs annually. So all of those assumptions have been validated that you'll see in the presentation by staff. So that's a 10% decrease in just the last month and a half. And I think given more time, we mined through a lot of WPI8s, or I guess I should say Jim did, but we looked through a lot of information, WPI8s, the data warehouse. I think we've only scratched the surface, and I think so much more can be done. So like Debbie said earlier, we'll jump into the slides on slide 4. Alicia will take us through that, but please feel free to ask any questions along the way.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. So exactly like he mentioned already, this presentation stems from our original scope of work that was completed back in September, and that was a 67-page report where Willis Towers Watson gave recommendations both from a rate indication perspective, so the actuarial rate indication, but also in the evaluation of the hurricane models. And within that report, there were a number of improvements that Willis felt TWIA could be making. Things like the use of storm surge, LAE loads, hurricane versus non-hurricane, hurricane frequency, how that's determined, and also, as Alan mentioned, on the reinsurance side, which is an important component of the rate filing. So with those recommendations, you can see on the highlighted chart on slide 4 was the ultimate rate indication for both residential and commercial, being a 32% and a 42% respectively. However, within that study that we conducted, on page 29 through 35 of the report, we talked a lot about the modeling, which impacts both the hurricane loss ratio within the rate filing and the reinsurance section of the rate filing, and how within the data quality of TWIA's portfolio, we saw potential for a lot of improvements, and that they could have a huge impact on the rate filing and reinsurance spend, as Alan alluded to. And so that really prompted this secondary study, this new scope of work. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And before we get into it, on slide 5, we want to outline a couple items. And really, what do we mean by data quality is number one. What are we talking about? And why is it important? Not just to TWIA, but to TWIA's third-party relationships, your reinsurance sellers, and how they are using that information within their evaluation. And last but not least is defining some terms, such as when we talk about primary risk characteristics and secondary modifiers, those two buckets, and what are we talking about and why are they important? So with that, I will pass it over to Jade, who's going to first talk about data quality on slide 6.
Yes, this is Jade. So why is data quality important? The better information you feed the model, the more accurate the resulting output. So for CAT modeling, the data inputs essentially boils down to location of a risk and the information about that risk. If you don't tell the catastrophe model about a risk, it will essentially make assumptions based on industry data, also known as default or unknown. As an example, for opening protection, RMS assumes that 60% of homes built before 2002 have no exterior openings, have windborne debris protection. TWIA underwriting guidelines for the Seaward and Inland 1 regions suggest that this default assumption may not give enough recognition for homes built with opening protection. So it's important to note that models are calibrated using industry data. So using TWIA specific data will lead to results that's more reflective of the TWIA underlying risk. Next slide.
Alan, is slide 7 the accurate number? I'm sorry.
Yes.
It is? Okay. Is it reflecting on your end?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, it looks like Alan's on mute. I don't know if you can come off mute, but just quickly on slide 7, as I alluded to,
There you go. Thanks. Sorry about that. I think Christina, I'm unmuted now. So the reinsurance purchase is obviously Texas windstorm's largest expense, and therefore it goes into the rate indication. So we just want to clarify why it's important. So when you give an exposure file of all the exposures of TWIA, and you give it to the reinsurance market to price your program, the process is generally the same, right? So the reinsurance broker takes the file, sends it to the reinsurers. The reinsurers literally plug it into the model. They don't make any changes. So whatever file Texas windstorm and the broker gives to the reinsurers, they plug it in. That's step 2. After that, they get the results. Then they will make qualitative adjustments. And we put some of them here. I think the biggest one is loss adjustment expense. They'll load for that. But generally, reinsurers will put their stamp on it, their view of risk for this portfolio. And then they'll develop a price. But the starting point is the same. So they get the file and then they make the adjustment. So just want to make that clear in the sense that every reinsurer in the world takes the same process, meaning the data file, and then puts it into RMS and AAR. All right, so we can go to slide 8.
Yes, when it comes to risk characteristics, there's essentially 2 categories, primary and secondary, as Alicia just mentioned. Primary risk characteristics are risk information pertaining to the construction, year built, occupancy, square footage, and building height of a location. The top chart shows which of these characteristics are available in TWIA original data for commercial versus residential. Essentially, for residential business, we have all of the primary risk characteristics provided by TWIA. On the commercial side, we have everything except for the occupancy. We do model it with general commercial, but it's just a broad level assumption based on the fact that it's the line of business is commercial. So, overall, the primary risk characteristics captured by TWIA is good. And then we have the secondary risk characteristics that are other information about the risk that's a bit more detailed. The bottom chart shows the modifiers or secondary risk characteristics that's available for modeling by model in RMS and AIR for the wind peril. So you can see some of the examples include, construction quality, opening protection, roof age, roof anchors, roof covering, etc. It's a little bit different between the models and the way they capture it, but some of the items are comparable between the models. For example, roof cover type or roof geometry. So TWIA has not been modeling with any secondary risk characteristics for rate making or reinsurance, as Alan mentioned before. As you will see, TWIA 100-year PML and reinsurance have been inflated because of the lack of these information.
Yeah, and just to tag on to this, Jade, I think it's so important because TWIA is not your run-of-the-mill insurance carrier, right? TWIA is writing a portfolio of really niche business, specifically along the most hurricane-exposed areas of the Texas coastline. And so just using the out-of-the-box modeling run with the primary risk characteristics clearly doesn't do justice to all the work that TWIA is doing, not only from the portfolio perspective, but from the underwriting perspective, right? TWIA is underwriting based on things like, openings protections that fall directly within these secondary risk characteristic buckets. And it's data that's been there for years, data that's been available for years that hasn't been touched when it comes to the modeling. And it's just so important that with, a laundry list, 14 available secondary modifiers in RMS and 24 available secondary modifier buckets in AAR, with a portfolio like TWIA's to be capturing that information. And so that leads us, to just the introduction of the next section, which is where we go into what we were able to work with the TWIA staff to capture within those existing data sources, and really what the numerical value was when we reran the models and saw the output of really merely scratching the surface of what we feel is available in terms of data improvements or data capturing within the TWIA book of business. So we can go to slide 10 here. And Jade's going to talk about the process that we went through.
Yes, so before going over the results, we want to quickly review the data that was gathered by TWIA for our updated analysis. We received 3 additional files to supplement the original data. These are the TWIA system data or data from the TWIA system data warehouse, data from EagleView, and then the data from WPI8. Within the TWIA data warehouse, we have information pertaining to TWIA class code, structure condition, roof year, building code credits, and building standards. From the EagleView data, we got roof condition, roof material, roof style, and tree overhang. And then within the WPI8 data system, we have, the type of inspection, whether, the roof has been inspected and whether there's opening protections, the certificate date, location of the risk, whether it's inland or seaward, and then building code, whether, IRC or it's IBC, et cetera, and whether the building is engineered or not. Some highlights of the information extracted from these files include, over 10,000 risks believed to be single-family dwelling were actually condo or apartment risks. In terms of occupancy, for commercial business, approximately 23% of the risks were recategorized as something other than general commercial. So this includes like multifamily dwelling, condos, homeowners association, education, religion, and nonprofit. We also have about 51,000 of locations that were modeled as unknown before, but we were able to categorize it as, risk with hurricane rated roof covering. In terms of roof year, 42% is after 2008, which is, after Hurricane Ike. We also have location credit for building code. About 40,000 insured obtained this credit, yet TWIA didn't get a credit on the reinsurance side. For WPI8 roof, there's about 22,000 locations that have been certified with average certification date being September 2009 after Hurricane Ike. And then in terms of, engineered buildings, about 18,000 are certified with engineered construction. So these are just kind of like rough information that we were able to get from these 3 data sources. Next slide, please. So we reviewed the information from these 3 data sources together with TWIA staff to determine the appropriate mappings for the modeling. The outcome is that we were able to capture 5 secondary modifiers in RMS and 6 in air for the updated modeling, where there was none before. The chart on the left just summarizes the, in green, the the secondary modifiers that we were able to capture. So for RMS, that includes construction quality, opening protection, roof age and roof condition, roof covering, and roof geometry. And then on the air side, we have building condition, roof covering, roof geometry, roof year build, tree exposure, and window protection. So as you can see here, there's still room for improvement as there are other secondary modifiers that we're not able to update. Next slide, please. So this slide just summarizes the secondary risk characteristics that I just mentioned that we were able to capture through this project over the last 43 days. The chart shows the percentage of risk captured by each of the risk characteristics. We were able to update the roof age and roof cover for almost the entire book. But as the chart shows, there's room for improvement in the roof geometry and roof opening, and opening protection modifiers, which could have a big impact on the model loss for the overall portfolio. The impact of these modifiers on model losses vary by models and by the different options within the particular modifier. But in general, as we mentioned in the report, in the phase 1 of this project, that the impact in RMS is generally more than in air, which is evident in the results that we produce in the report. The other 2 items that I want to mention is that on the primary risk characteristics side, we also updated, 10,000 multifamily dwellings were previously modeled as single family homes are now, multifamily dwelling. All the mobile home risks have been updated to explicitly include tie downs, which significantly reduce the results within the mobile home business. And then 23% of general commercial business have been recategorized to occupancies other than just general commercial. Next slide.
Excellent. So that was basically what we did over the past month and a half by working with the TWIA staff, was capturing all this data, and you can see the levels of success that we had with the various modifiers. So our next step in the process was to take this new information, tag it on to the existing portfolio that we modeled and showed you, which throughout the rest of this section will be dubbed the original. So the original WTW report. So we took that original, added in these secondary modifiers, and this next section goes into the output. So what actually resulted. And it impacts two areas. So the models produce two key figures that TWIA uses. And so on the left-hand side, that first output is the AAL, the average annual loss. And that's an important metric because TWIA uses it for the rate filing at the county level. So we do a county level AAL separately for residential and commercial. And that gets plugged into your rate filing Exhibit 5, the hurricane loss ratio. On the right-hand side is the second metric that's very important, which is the PML, so the probable maximum loss. So this output is important because it allows TWIA to determine the 1 in 100-year PML, and that is both used for the reinsurance limit, but also, like we talked about in the beginning, reinsurers use that output for their pricing. And those two things are important because they flow into Exhibit 11 of the rate filing document, being the fixed expenses. So reinsurance being one of the largest fixed expenses for the TWIA organization. So to kick us off, we're going to talk about the AAL on the next slide. And so to give a bit of background here, so the AAL again is used for the hurricane loss ratio. Within the rate filing, the hurricane loss ratio is a weighted average of the modeled hurricane loss ratio and the experience. So right now we're specifically talking about the modeled AAL, so the modeled loss ratio. And one of Willis Towers Watson recommendations in our original report, which we'll carry through here, is the changing of the weights of RMS and AAR to a 75-25 blend. So that first bullet there, which was previously a 50-50 blend. So keeping that the same in the original versus our new revised output. For residential, our original modeled hurricane loss ratio was 52.6%. With the revised updated data, that loss ratio drops to a 49% loss ratio. So dropping, 3.6%. Just with, again, just barely scratching the surface on some of these secondary modifiers. Commercial drops from a 61.2% loss ratio in the original output to a 59.8% loss ratio in the revised. And you see, while there is a drop there, it's much more significant on the residential side because there was more available data from a secondary modifier perspective in the residential book of business compared to the commercial. And residential, keep in mind, is the bulk of the portfolio. So between those two, obviously more of the book of business in residential. So this is again kind of that left-hand side of the chart on the previous slide, showing the impact to the modeled hurricane loss ratio as an input to the rate filing. And so I'm going to pass it over to Alan, who now is going to talk about the PML side and the impact there.
Yeah, so we're talking about the right side of that chart before. This is in Exhibit 11. So there's a lot of numbers here on the next slide. If we go to, there we go. So there's a lot of numbers here, but this is the impact of this data quality on the reinsurance expense within the rate filing, as well as the determination of the 1 in 100-year PML. So let me just start by going through the columns from left to right, and then we'll talk about the numbers. So just to define what it is. So column A is the current approach. So that's the current approach on PML determination and the reinsurance expense. Column B is the original pre-data quality report from September 22nd that we delivered. And then column C is the revised with all of the new secondary modifiers. And then you can see on the other three columns are the changes for the various columns. So if we go down, we have model weight. So we go from 50-50 to the 75-25 is the recommendation. So you get the 1 in 100-year event using November 2019 data. So all three of these columns are using the same data file from Texas Windstorm to make it apples to apples. We add on loss adjustment expense. So LE is not modeled in CAT models. So Texas Windstorm currently uses 15%. We recommended 17.2, which you can see there. And then you get the 1 in 100 year PML with LAE. So it's currently 4.2 for 2020. Column B, we originally came down to 3.7. And then with this new data that we've captured, it's come down to 3.5 billion. So again, this is for 2020. And if you compare that on the far right, just simply capturing more data has given us, so column C minus B has reduced the PML by $225 million just in the last month and a half. But if you compare what we have today versus what the current approach was, it's a reduction of the PML by $685 million. So that's the limit. That's the reinsurance limit in the PML. If we bring in the cost component of that, the current cost of reinsurance is $102 million. Column B, which we presented in September, because the PML came down and you're buying less reinsurance, the cost of that was $85 million we presented in September. And then again, as we captured more data, better data quality, the PML comes down. It gives us, on the $3.5 billion PML, gives us a cost of $76 million. And I just want to make it very clear that in column B and column C, the staff was involved in all the assumptions. So it's not just Willis Towers Watson making up numbers. So the staff was involved in validating the reinsurance cost assumptions. So if you just compare the cost on the far right, comparing just over the last month and a half with better data, it saves $9.2 million. And if you take into account this entire process that Willis Towers Watson was involved in since this project began, it's $26 million of reinsurance savings. And again, like we've discussed before, reinsurance is a significant expense of Texas Windstorm, and so $26 million is a significant savings. So there's a lot of numbers in this exhibit. Are there any questions on this? I'll pause before we move on.
Yeah, this is Corrice Morrison. I have a question, not so much on this. I guess if I could step back a minute on the data quality and the improved level of data and information that we have now.
Sure.
From those secondary risk characteristics or modifiers, or what the term was. We have that data now going forward, correct? This is address specific policy level data, correct? That we did not have before, or we had, but we weren't using properly. Is that true?
Well, the location of the property was never an issue. That's always been pretty good. So geocoding it to the actual location. It's just the characteristics of the dwelling or the characteristics of the commercial property that we've expanded on.
And so we have that data now, right? You're saying?
That's correct. Yeah, we worked with Jim Murphy and the staff, and Jim's got all the data.
And so, yeah, so now with that clarification and additional detail of data at the address or policy level, we're storing that. Is that correct, Jim or John or whomever from staff? We have that now going forward and can always call on that. And then as well as new business that comes on, we'll be able and will continue to collect and store that kind of data going forward?
That is correct, Grace, yes.
Okay. Okay. So this,
and just to clarify, it was always there in the data warehouse, and Jim went to TDI as well with WPA8. So most of that data was already there. We just had to capture it and model it.
Okay. So this is now the benefit of something going forward. We will always be able to look at this level of detail on policy level kind of specificity, I guess would say.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Dave Futterly, but I'll jump on what Carice just asked. So you have a mechanism in place to keep the data from from the policies that are currently on the books. What about new business? Is there a plan to bring the same level of detail in with new business?
Some of this information we get from Eagle View, and they update their aerial photography, I believe, weekly. That information has only been available since March of this year, so it hasn't been available to us beforehand, but we intend to put in place a process by which the new policies will be updated.
Okay.
For that information.
Yeah, I would say that's critical that we have that right path going forward, so we don't lose ground from where we are today, right? So all new business as well, we continue to gather and have this level of detail.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And I'd like to ask, as I understood, we don't have this on 100% of our book of business. Is there a plan move forward to make sure that we have all the data we need on our total book of business? And what will that take?
I think that we will have 100% of the data that is sourced through the Eagle View process. But that data that depends on WPI8s, would only apply to a portion of the policy. But obviously, we'll endeavor to get as much coverage as possible.
Some secondary modifiers that we didn't have a very big percentage of. And I don't know if we can work with the agents committee to see how the agents could help us, assist us in gathering that data that we don't have, because it's obvious the more data you have, the more accurate our costs are.
True, and we would with the new system and with this additional information, I think we will look to see what additional data might be required in order to make an application. As you know, we've endeavored to make the policy application process easier and faster for agents, but we can certainly consider what information we would have to have required and make sure we can also verify that data.
This is Steve Alexander. I noticed that the models were run assuming that 80% of the properties did not have opening protection. That seems to be inconsistent with the underwriting rules for inland wind and seaward, the underwriting requirements. I'm wondering why the models were not run assuming that all of the properties met the underwriting requirements required by TWIA.
That's a good question. So we worked with Jim and Jerry and the staff to make the most reasonable assumptions and conservative assumptions we could. And so I believe any policy after 2003 and anything that was retrofitted built prior to 98, I think is able to get a credit. If you were to capture more of that information, again, we can't just make up information, but if we can capture it in a logical way, according to, and again, you give them a credit. So if you're in Seaward, you get a 28% premium credit on your dwelling and 23% on contents. The same in inland, you get a credit. So if we're able to get better information, we can plug that into the model, which would only reduce the PML.
But couldn't you run the models now, just assuming that all of the properties met those underwriting requirements?
Yes, we actually did that. And I don't have the numbers with me, but I believe it does make a significant difference. But again, I think we would need approval by staff because there are exceptions, like I mentioned. Just because you're in Seaward doesn't mean you have to have opening protections. And so we would need to be very clear with staff on which property gets it and which does not. So to answer your question, you can model any property with opening protections on the windows and the doors and the garage door. We would need to work with staff a little more to do that.
Alan, if you don't mind, can I clarify just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Hopefully I said that right, Jim.
I think you did, but just for a little bit more extra detail, the underwriting requirements for exterior protections, those apply to homes constructed to the current building codes, or at least the most recent building codes. They do not apply retroactively to homes that are older than that. And so we have a substantial portion of our book of business that was built prior to the WPA requirement. And so for those homes, we actually don't know definitively whether or not there are exterior openings. They would have had to have been installed after the fact or most recently. And so it would take an inspection process or asking for information from the agents to get better data on those older homes. But on the newer homes that are subject to the underwriting requirements to have exterior openings, those are the ones that we did populate with the values in the models.
Steve Alexander again. Couldn't you do a sampling study, like sample 500 to 1,000 homes and get a pretty good estimate of the number of homes that actually had opening protection?
Is that a question for Willis or for the staff?
Either one is fine.
We can model anything that that staff wants to model. Yeah.
And clearly the answer is yes, that is something that we could do, yes.
Wouldn't that be something that we should really do before we settle on a number as far as what the rate increase should be?
I think the important thing is whether you can kind of back it up with, you can't just say, okay, let's just do this broad assumption that all of these locations have opening protection. That would definitely decrease the losses by a lot, but I think when you go to the market, or you kind of have to have good story or evidence to kind of back up why you make that assumption.
Yeah, because in the past, Steve, we were giving credits to the insureds, but the organization wasn't getting the credit on the reinsurance because we weren't modeling it that way, or at least the broker wasn't modeling it that way.
Well, I understand that the broker may not give credit on the reinsurance, but it does affect the ALL and the PML, and that's independent of whatever the reinsurance broker and the reinsurer is willing to do. I think that if you did a sample of like 1,000 properties, that would be very strong evidence that what the confidence level there would be pretty high, and there wouldn't be much doubt as to the number of properties that had opening protection.
I'd be interested, this is Grace, I'd be interested though to see how you would do a sample like that and make sure that you're covering all the jurisdictions. I wonder if that would be, and I don't know, but I would question, is that consistent county to county? That's just a question. I don't know that answer. So you'd have to, I would think, want to make sure that you did some kind of selection that was trying to reflect different jurisdictions, rules, enforcement, practices, etc.
I totally agree with that. And I think the key areas are Galveston and Corpus Christi. I don't think it really matters that much in the rest of the state because the rest of the state doesn't really affect the ALL or the PML that much. So I would focus on Galveston and Corpus Christi. And I think that you would get a statistically valid sample, very credible. If you took like even a 500,000, would it be even more credible?
This is Dave Futterly. One suggestion here, because doing a survey of 1,000 homes and making sure it's statistically viable seems like it's an expensive proposition. I would personally be interested in seeing what the CAP models give as a range and how that translates into a rate indication. If you were to assume 100% had the exterior opening, and then if you assumed 75%, and then if you assume 25%, just see how sensitive the rate indication actually is to that assumption before you go out and do that survey, because that seems like something that would be a pretty quick thing to do.
I totally agree with that. I think that's a smart thing to do. And based on what's been said so far, it appears that it would be a significant reduction if all of the homes had opening protection.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
guess though that all of the homes probably don't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but 100% of the homes to have opening protections,
That,
that might be.
that's absolutely, and that's absolutely my point. If we were to see that, if you were to assume 100% had exterior openings, and it only moved the rate indication by 5 points, it may not be as material as we think it is. But if you see it moves it by 30 points, then it's something we should look at.
I agree with that. I think it's worth the time to do some sampling to see approximately where we're at.
yeah. Just to give you a number, it's 2.7 billion is the 100-year that we have, which is down, but that's only assuming Seaward has it. But again, we need to work with staff to make sure you make realistic assumptions before you model it.
I have a question for you or for anyone. There's the plywood issue. I think like if they don't have it installed, even on the older homes, if they don't have like upgraded windows, they still have to have plywood to install at the time of the storm. Is that right? I mean, it seems like that's come up before. And
The building code requirement on the current codes in Inland 1 requires structures to either have the upgraded windows opening protection or to have pre-cut plywood that can be installed in the event of a storm. I think that's the issue that you're thinking of, Debbie. So
okay. And so just curious, in this sample that we've been talking about, would that count in the model as some sort of protection if they had plywood?
I think, Alan Jade, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did assume that Inland 1 risks built to the current codes did have opening protection. We were counting the plywood as opening protection.
Counting it, okay.
That's correct, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Not for all of them, but if we had the WPA8s and they got a credit, yeah.
Okay.
So if there's no more questions, we have, I think, a couple more slides, but I will just make a note before we go to the next one. You know, there's other data sources and there's a lot of good artificial intelligence that can be used to go into claims files and other reports. So again, I think you've only scratched the surface here of what can be done. As we go to the next slide, so we just talked about using this new data and the PML change and the reinsurance cost change. But Alicia is going to take us through just another one just to say that, all right, if the board and the committee do not elect to go with the 75-25 PML determination, there's still a significant savings. So we just wanted to point that out with a different model weight. So Alicia can take us through this one.
Before you start on that, can I ask another question? I'm sorry. Can we go back just a little bit? Willis Towers Watson has mentioned that there are a lot of data extraction and artificial intelligence options available in the market to quickly and efficiently assist TWIA in capturing additional claims and exposure information. That's a quote from your prior report. Did you actually have discussions with Willis? This is addressed to WTW. Did you actually have discussions with Willis or with TWIA about using these other options, and what was the result of those discussions if you had them?
Yeah, it's been discussed, but we were under a tight time frame in the last 45 days. So just you couldn't get a third-party vendor. I mean, we know all the vendors. They could contract with TWIA. There just wasn't enough time to get that done prior to today, December 1st. But I think that's up to John and Jerry and the board to get that cost approved.
Did you give them a cost, and how much time would it take?
We did not give them a cost. We have other clients that use that type of third-party vendor. Typically, they'll quote a deal after conversations with a company. They'll quote a deal in a week or two. And then as far as timing goes, now TWIA had just upgraded the system to Guidewire, which is one of the better systems to use with artificial intelligence. It can be done in a month. Sometimes it's 5 months. It just depends on the system. And I think the claims is on Guidewire as well. I'm not certain about that, but I think that's a conversation that we can all have, but it will take some time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just going back to the slides here, one of the things that we wanted to point out, and again, going back to what you saw a couple slides ago, the left-hand side and the right-hand side being the AAL and the impact there, of this new data improvement run, and then the PML. One of the things we wanted to isolate within the PML is to, number one, eliminate some of the variables and just highlight because some of it was based on recommendations that we made in our phase 1 report, one of which was the model weight, the AAR and RMS model weight. So TWIA's current approach is a 50-50 blend of those two models, right? The output of those two models. Our Willis recommendation, which you can refer to back in that 67-page document and the details around it, was to move to a 75% weight towards RMS and a 25% weight towards AAR based on a number of factual reasons. Now, we understand that there is some gravity to that decision to changing the model weights. So what this slide does is it says, if you choose not to take Willis's recommendation on that 50-50, on the 75-25 blend, but alternatively continue on with your current approach, what is the impact, right, on the PML? And the impact is what you can see. Column A is your current approach. Column B is what I just described. And then on the far right-hand side is the difference. And highlighted in bold and in gray is the impact on the 1 in 100 year PML. So your original, your current approach was 4.2 million. If you just make these data improvements, right, your 1 in 100 year PML using a 50-50 blend goes down to just under 3.9 billion for a reduction in your 1 in 100 year PML of $320 million. So that is an 8% reduction in your PML by only capturing a very small amount of additional data, right? When we started this study, we didn't know how the PML was going to change. We suspected that it would have a positive impact, meaning that the PMLs and the AALs would go down. But we were not certain. And this here shows that if you just isolate that one variable, reduces your 1 in 100 year PML by $320 million, which is a very big number, for 45 days worth of data extraction. So bringing that into how it relates to your cost, right? Because you would then not be required by statute to buy. In fact, you would be prohibited from buying, additional limit without additional guidance via the statute. If you bought up to the 100 year PML, it reduces your reinsurance spend by $12.2 million. Again, just with these additional data modifications, which is a very, very important, consideration when, the decision is made to capture potentially even more information, right? Because it has a direct impact to how much TWIA spends on reinsurance, which of course flows through, to your rate indications, right? Again, reinsurance is one of the largest components of TWIA's fixed expenses. So dollars of saving on reinsurance translates to, lower rate indications, right? Smaller increases, for example. And so that's really what this slide highlights here, is that, again, if you don't take Willis's recommendation on the model blend and you just run your existing data with these modifiers that we've pulled, it's a savings of 12.2 million on your reinsurance.
Can I ask a quick question? This is David Futterlieb. And forgive me if you're working up to this, but do you at all talk about how this 12.2 million translates into the actual rate indication? So, I saw that the residential indication went down about 6 points. How much of that is driven by this? How much of it is driven by the AAL? Is there sort of a waterfall that you're building up to sort of explain those changes?
Absolutely. We do have that all detailed. Or go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, it's the next couple of slides, but I just want to make one point before we move into that, which are the next two slides, the actual rate indication. The $320 million of limit here that would be saved, or less limit, the cost was just validated by staff. So again, it's not Willis Towers Watson making up numbers. The reinsurance cost for that $320 million limit was validated by staff. So with that, we can move into that question. We have copied in the summary of the rate indication on the next two slides. Lisa can take us through that. This is Exhibit 1, the summary. Obviously, the PDFs were posted as well for public as well. So Lisa, you want to take us through the residential and the commercial?
I
think you're
can
still
you hear me,
muted
Alan?
there, Lisa. Jared,
Can
yep,
you hear
go
me,
ahead.
Alan? Yeah, I'll be doing it. Yeah,
Yep.
I'll be doing these. Okay, thanks everyone. So yes, my name is Jared Cabell. I'm an actuary here at Willis Towers Watson. So yes, there are a lot of numbers on this page, but this is the summary of the residential rate indication. If you look there on the right-hand side in purple there, you will see that the residential rate indication has decreased from 32% in September of this year to 26%. So again, as Mr. Futterlib just made mention to, about the 6 points improvement on an additive basis. So to break this down a bit, so the modeled hurricane loss ratio, which is again a 75%, 25% weighting of RMS and air, that is now 49%. You'll see there in column 2. And that's an improvement of nearly 4% from where it was in September on an additive basis. Again, primarily related to the data quality initiative that my colleagues have previously discussed in detail, early on this call. We do use a 50-50 weighting of mob results and actual hurricane results. So thus the weighted hurricane loss ratio fell roughly 2% to 42.6%. Again, you'll see that in that first row in column 2 there in that hurricane column. The reinsurance expense, again, which has been discussed in detail previously, that's fallen roughly 3%, again, on an additive basis. So what we end up with—
That's 3 percentage points, right, Jared?
Sorry, 3 percentage points. Yes, all these are percentage points.
3 nominal,
yes, yes. Right. I think it's kind of the easiest way to explain it here. But so, so taking all that into consideration, it's about a 6 percentage point difference or improvement in the residential rate indication relative to what we provided in September. So if there's no questions on that, and maybe there'll be more, after I go through the commercial here. If not, we can go to the next slide.
Just one more slide. Yep.
Yep. So again, if you draw your attention to the right-hand side with the purple kind of outline there, the commercial rate indication did actually increase slightly from 42% in September to 44%, so about 2 percentage points, again, on an additive basis. From a modeled hurricane loss ratio standpoint, which is again that 75%, 25% weighting of RMS and air, it improved nearly 1.5 percentage points to 59.8%. You can see there in column 2, again, primarily related to the data quality initiative that's been spoken to earlier. Again, when we use that 50-50 weighting of modeled results and actual hurricane results, so the weighted hurricane loss ratio improved roughly 1 percentage point to 55% in column 2. So there's still improvement we see thus far, but on the reinsurance expense side, that actually increased roughly 2.5 percentage points. And to break that down, so the reason why with this, so previously in September, the total reinsurance premium was allocated roughly 82% residential, 18% commercial. Then with this latest work, the total reinsurance premium is allocated roughly 77% residential and 23% commercial. So it's a 5-point swing. Commercial used to be 18%, now it's a 23% allocation. This ultimately results in a higher expected net cost of reinsurance, relative to the September analysis, which actually raises the indicated reinsurance expense a bit for commercial. So we saw a large drop for residential, which is very significant because it's a much larger portion of the overall book. We do see a reinsurance expense increase, indicated reinsurance expense percentage increase for commercial, which again is a smaller percentage of the book. So the higher reinsurance expense is really what's attributable to the overall rate increase or higher indicated rate change that we're seeing in commercial on an additive basis.
And I would just add the reason for that is the reason why the allocation went up for commercial is because when we went through this data and remodeled, because we were able to make significant improvements on the residential, the proportion of AAL for residential went down because we captured a lot more data there, right? And it was more accurate. However, because we weren't able to capture as much on the commercial side, right, there wasn't a lot of change there. So you have residential AAL coming down and you have commercial staying, closer to the same. So the proportion of average annual loss attributed to commercial relative to residential went up. So that's why you see that change there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alicia.
This is Corey Morrison. I have a question for staff or maybe Mike Perkins. The current 50-50 blend, first question, was that an explicit decision that the board made? Second question, can this committee make a recommendation to the board if we wanted to change to the 75-25?
This is Mike. With respect to your first question, I don't remember anything that specific. If Mr. Fadden or Mr. Murphy wants to correct me, they can. The 50-50 weighting is I don't know the specific lineage of it, but I don't recall seeing anything that specific. In terms of your recommendation, I think the committee is absolutely free to make whatever recommendation the committee thinks is appropriate within their charge to comment on the rate review. So yes, if you want to comment on that in your recommendation to the board, that would be appropriate.
I'd just add that the board saw the results of each of them separately, and I think accepted the 50-50 blend, which we maintained. Let me just add that both models have understated actual losses in terms of recent events as like Ike and Harvey. So we've considered them both to have a fair amount of uncertainty to them, and based on that, suggested that a 50-50 blend was ideal.
Thank you. And then following on to that, to Willis, can you go through again, and my apologies for maybe missing this, but why you believe the 75-25 blend is more appropriate for TWIA?
Yeah, I can just kind of briefly go over the reasons why we chose a 75-25 mix. So we look at the modeling from different perspectives. So we look at the frequency, severity, and the overall loss validation through industry historical losses. So in terms of frequency, we compare comparison of the historical hurricane frequency by cat size for Texas shows that RMS is closer to the historical frequency than air overall. And then in terms of severity, we review it in context of the model's method and assumptions for determining the damage functions and how sensitive each model is to the user input. And with that regard, we feel that RMS is a little bit more detailed, and the way they have the vulnerability or damage functions developed by region is more specific to Texas than in air. And then there's also some, components of the primary risk characteristics that's not considered by air when RMS does take that into consideration. And then we also went through an overall loss validation where we compare it to the industry historical losses, to the RMS and air model losses. So based on our validation of industry losses from RMS and air model against the, the large events of the past, RMS is closer to PCS on an absolute basis for, 7 of the 8 large events. While, so that's, so that's just kind of like a brief overview of what we went through to determine our decision. So more details on that can be found in the official report that we produced back in September.
I appreciate that. So if I'm tracking then, in spite of like staying on this page, and then we can go back to the residential in a sec, but staying on this page, in spite of the fact that the plus 44 is highlighted, Willis is really recommending a plus 50, right? If you track with your 75-25 mix. True?
I think I think it is the plus 44 because that 50-50 blend that you see on the first line using experience and models, that's for the hurricane loss pick. So within the modeling section of the hurricane loss pick, we've weighted AAR 25% and RMS 75. Okay. We get a value, and then that value is weighted 50% with experience. Does that help clarify?
Okay, I think so. It's just confusing how it says the plus 50 next to the 25-75. But I see on the top when it says using experience and models. But still the models are 50-50, right?
The model and experience is weighted 50-50, but the model weight within the modeled loss ratio within that figure. So within the 59.8, if you see in column 2, using hurricane models, that's weighted 25% to AAR and 75% to RMS.
Okay, so the plus 44 does reflect that then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Just one more slide. If so we'll go to slide 19, the final slide, just a summary.
Could we go back one more second or go back to the slide?
Sure.
Before? I thought I was unmuted and.
That's all right. You go to the residential or the commercial?
Either one. I'm still stuck on the $12 million savings. So if we were to have that $12 million and be able to apply it to the class 1 bonds or fixed expenses, if we can pay off those bonds, will go down. Is that correct? Which will also impact rate?
That's correct. So you're referencing slide 16. So slide 16 was just saying if the board didn't change any methodology in buying reinsurance, still using 50-50, no changes at all other than using the data that we just captured that Jim now has, there'd be $12 million of savings with doing nothing other than using the new data. That $12 million of reinsurance cost would be saved. And then, whatever happens after that with the rate indications or buy more reinsurance is up to the board.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was thinking correctly.
Yeah, and all of that, all of this is applied to what would be the 2020 reinsurance program because we're using the same data that the reinsurers used for the 2020 hurricane season. So, I think this project, proved to be very valuable to all the stakeholders involved, the insureds and staff. Again, this isn't really new data. It's data that was available, but I think, a whole lot more can be done in the future. Over the last month and a half, we've given staff new risk elements to include in from various sources. I think we've improved the accuracy of the rate indications because you have better data. And then just from a reinsurance perspective, we've talked about this many times. Just over the last 43 days, we've reduced the reinsurance limit by $225 million, which is about $9 million of cost. But over the last several months since we were engaged, that's the number you see at the bottom. So current versus what we have today is a reduction in reinsurance cost of $26 million, which is 25% of the overall cost. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate this engagement, and we're happy to take additional questions.
Thank you, Alan, and all the Willis Group and all the TWIA staff that helped with this. This is excellent presentation. I think we've all learned a lot over this year, and we know so much more about the book and what we have, what we don't have, and where we can focus attention. So thank you very much. And does anyone have further questions or want to circle back on any part of the presentation for more clarification?
Debbie, yeah, this is Corey. I guess, we've heard a lot, and this is great information. And again, echoing what you said, appreciate everything that we've gone through today from Willis. We've heard a little bit from staff, but I'm wondering if we could get anything from Jim or Jerry or John, the Triple J's, about their opinion about what we've heard today and their involvement and their confidence in what Willis has presented us today.
Sure.
I'll take a stab at that. I think overall, we've been very impressed with the work that Willis has done. I think their initial report kind of corroborated the methodologies that TWIA staff has used. As one might expect, there were different assumptions and different approaches to some of the detail within that report. We've done some work to reconcile the two, and they're not mistakes or errors on either parts, the part of TWIA staff or Willis, but just some different assumptions. But I think overall, I think directionally, they're in the same neighborhood. Before this, the second Willis engagement, we'd been engaged with underwriting, the underwriting department, together with the actuarial department. Now that the information was available from Eagle View, we were we had an effort underway to see if we could capture that data. I think the Willis involvement and this accelerated time frame kind of gave us the results sooner, and I think that is all good, and we can, as we've talked about earlier, continue to update that data and improve our results. The only other comment I would make is that clearly reducing the amount of reinsurance we buy will reduce our costs, but that's only sort of part of the equation. We're presumably buying reinsurance as a risk management technique, and I would, so there's a trade-off in terms of some greater exposure to unfunded losses, but that's for the board to evaluate. The other thing I would generally say is that relying on the models as if they provide a precise answer is a little precarious. These are very complicated models with complicated algorithms, but I don't think Mother Nature is paying much attention. So I would just kind of emphasize that they're meant to be a guidepost for risk management, not a precise calculator. But all in all, I think this has been very helpful. I commend the Willis folks. I'd be curious as to whether, whether they would recommend RMS over, AIR for all of their Texas clients, or whether there's something particular about the TWIA portfolio that warrants that approach, and why not do 100% RMS? I mean, it's a well regarded model, and if you think it's sufficiently accurate? Is there some, should we go further down this road?
Yeah, I'll take that. So all the clients in Texas have different buying philosophies. Some use only AR, some only use RMS, some blend. Same with residual markets, right? Florida Citizens has a different approach than Texas Windstorm. I think Texas Windstorm is unique because of the large market share in Tier 1. Most of the reinsurance buyers in Texas don't have a significant market share in Tier 1, so that makes a difference. So hopefully that answers your question. I think it's up to the reinsurance buyers. Everybody's got a different view. But yes, we stand by our recommendation of 75-25.
No, I wasn't questioning that. I understand that. I just wondered if it was generally applicable in Texas, and it sounds like it's a mixed result there. And with respect to whether it should be used exclusively, I don't know.
Yeah, I think every portfolio is different. Our job as a reinsurance broker is to provide scientific evidence and support based on claims and exposures, and then we allow the client to make that decision.
Well, this is Georgia, and I'd like to say I very much appreciate the report, both in September and this current information. I had no idea the impact of not collecting and using that data would have on our cost of insurance, or how we took care of our hurricane losses in 1 in a 100-year storm. And as a member of this committee, I think that this report would be invaluable to the entire board. And I'd like to make a motion, if you will entertain one, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I move that we approve the report that was presented by Willis Tower and move it to the board meeting in December without a rate filing, and ask the board to look at the necessity of additional data gathering or further review by Willis Tower before a rate is determined. And that would be the motion moving forward.
What, Georgia, can you clarify that last sentence again?
That the motion going forward is that the committee does not make a rate recommendation, that we recommend that this report is viewed by the entire board, and the board, based on the information that they receive from this, can determine if they need to make a rate filing, or whether they want to wait and allow the impact of any legislation that may come down in the very near future.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Steve Alexander, I second that motion.
Thank you, Steve. I'll open that for discussion. Does anyone have comments regarding the motion, which would be to provide this information to the board? If I can summarize, Georgia, that we would recommend that the board take this under advisement for any rate change that they deem advisable, considering their other considerations. I don't know if I said that exactly right.
Well, this is Steve Alexander again. I think Willis made clear that we've only scratched the surface, and there's a lot more work that could be done. I think particularly with regard to opening protection, there's a lot more work that could be done. I think we could do what David suggested and have Willis run some alternatives with different levels of opening protection, because right now the models were run with over 80% unknown opening protection. So I think we need to get a sense of what the effect would be of different assumptions for opening protection. And there's a lot of other unknowns that have been coded in the data so far. And because Willis has said that we've just scratched the surface, I think there's a lot more work that could be done. And we need to get a sense of what the potential impact on the rate indications and also on the 100-year PML and the reinsurance buy would be after taking all of these unknowns, looking at these unknowns and taking these things into consideration.
So this is Dave Butterleaf. I just wanted to follow up on something that Stephen, you just said, and Willis said. The comment was made that we're just scratching the surface, and I'd like a little bit more context about what that means. And I know putting a percentage on it is not the right way to approach this, but from my perspective, you know, I've been around cat modeling for a while, and what I've seen is that you guys flip the switch on quite a bit of the more material secondary modifiers, and you know, you can always improve your data. We could spend, you know, years looking at data and improving it to the nth degree, but it's probably not going to have a material impact on the indication. So I would just like to hear a little bit from Willis Towers Watson about kind of what they meant by scratching the surface, and, you know, what they think from a, you know, an impact on the rate indication. Is it double digits, or are we talking about, you know, under 5%? Because at the end of the day, the indication right now is above 20% for residential. It's above 40% for commercial. You know, putting the public policy, you know, conversation aside, because I am an actuary and I'm going to stay in my lane, which is to analyze the actuarial indications. You know, we are staring at a healthy rate need indication, and I do struggle with continuing to put a decision off any longer, you know, to potentially poke at our data and not really see any material change from that. So I guess if you guys could talk a little bit about what you mean by scratch the surface and what you think that might mean on the indication, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, this was only 43 days of work, and I think we've made long strides. I think the timeline and the deadline was set at a date for this meeting, as well as a board meeting next week, as well as the need to get into the reinsurance market with a new data set to give to reinsurers for the 2021 hurricane season. So I think it's fair to say that additional work and additional data would not get to a rate redundancy, would get to a rate decrease. I think it's fair to say that there'll still be a rate indication that's positive. But I think, you know, like all of our clients, this is a continuous project every year. We talked about AI, we talked about other claims sources and other data sources. There's really no end to this. It needs to continue. So hopefully that answered your question. I think there is a lot more work to be done, but kind of December 1st was the deadline that the committee set before, as well as the timeline that staff had asked us to present.
I'm going to jump in here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to show my age here. I remember the days of the Sanborn map books, which were very detailed in underwriting of property insurance. But as an underwriter and a field special agent, we also required the agents to send in pictures of the property that they were asking us to underwrite. And since I'm new to the board, I'm not aware of what any kind of requirement we have that the agents provide us with material descriptions or pictures. But as you know, you can never have enough information when you're trying to underwrite property. There's just no way around it. So I absolutely concur that we need more information, because that will give a better feeling of accuracy on the part of the reinsurance people. The more they think we know what we're doing, the lower our costs are going to be. And so that's just my comment there. But I do agree, Alan, that there should be some, everything I've read so far, and I've read everything, there's got to be some sort of a rate increase, but who knows what it is. But the more data we get, the more accurate we're going to be in whatever we recommend to the TDI. That's my comment.
Debbie, this is Steve Alexander again. I've got another comment I'd like to make.
Please do.
I think it's pretty clear at this point that TWIA has been overestimating its 100-year PML and has been buying too much reinsurance. I think it comes down to a question of should current policyholders be penalized for TWIA buying excessive reinsurance over the last 10 years? If they bought less reinsurance, if they'd been using better data, it's pretty clear that the debt that they have at this point would be less, so there would be no debt. And with no debt, the rate indication would be negative. So I think it goes back to we've got an insurer of last resort. Should the policyholders who don't have recourse, in many cases, to other coverage, should they be penalized for this debt now based on management decisions that were made in the past, purchasing too much reinsurance?
I question the phrase too much reinsurance. I understand if it's managing to a 1 in 100, but I would also say that had we experienced an event beyond 1 in 100, the reinsurance would have been available to us to collect. So it's not that we would have not received benefit from that purchase. I just wanted to be clear on that, right?
Yeah, and also the 1 in 100 came, I believe, came into play more this year due to who pays for who is responsible for the cost of the 1 in 100 as opposed to over 1 in 100. So I think the board has a right, they could buy reinsurance to a 1 in 200. I believe that's correct if they wished, and then it would be a matter of who pays for that. But so I think that changed a little bit, Steve, this year.
Right.
Regarding the cost. I mean, your point's well taken. I was just trying to make that clarification.
Yeah, there's nothing that restricts us, right, as a board, or the board,
Right.
nothing that restricts the board from buying over 1 in 100.
For buying more.
In fact, I sit on some organizations that have up to 1 in 300, right, in their residual market funding structure. So it is unique to each organization. But you're right. Now the requirement is 1 in 100 for who funds it, right? But it doesn't restrict beyond 1 in 100. At least that's
my understanding.
Right. I agree with what David, with what you were saying. I too want to see us get as best quality of data that we reasonably should have, right? That we can continue to see improvements in our data. And I appreciate even the comments that were brought up about, understanding the benefit of the openings and where we are today and what can be done to get even better quality data regarding that. But having said that, I feel our responsibility still is to look at the information that's been presented to us today. And David, to your comment, we still are over +20 and over +40 on residential and commercial respectively. So my thought is I agree with basically many parts of the motion except for the 0 recommendation. I would prefer to see at least a +5 go and be recommended to the board, and at a minimum. It's still the board's decision. It's not our decision as a committee to make this. This is the board's decision. We're only here to make a recommendation. So the board will still be the final act on this, but that would be my preference for a motion. But I appreciate, thank you. Let me comment on it.
I have one more clarification. I think, Jared, maybe you can comment on this. We've talked a lot about the modeling, the indications, and how it's being driven by the data quality. It's also, there's a very big component of the indication that's being driven by the repayment of the Class 1 bonds. I just want to clarify, Jared, I believe that in the indication as it is now, there was no contemplation of acceleration of that payment. Is that correct?
Correct. The interest expense that's in the rate indications in both the TWIA rate indications are based on the scheduled debt principal and interest payments for 2020 in relation to written premium.
Okay.
It's a slight area of difference between the two analyses. I think in the Willis, they've compared it to the higher amount of earned premium. So there's a little bit of a technical difference in the calculation, but it is the scheduled payment.
Schedule payment. Okay. I know that comment was brought up by Georgia as well as Steve Alexander regarding taking the money from the reinsurance savings to pay the bonds. I would say that that's not been contemplated in the indication, and it would drop the indication. I can tell you from repaying that interest or not having that interest payment in the following year. Just wanted to clarify that. Are there any other comments regarding that, or any of the modeling, or the motion that anyone would like to put on the table before we vote? Okay, hearing none. I just want to maybe give you my thoughts. I'm thinking back to almost a year ago, exactly, December, Corpus Christi meeting where we were asked as a committee to, we made a recommendation for 5% at that time. There was a lot, we had a laundry list, if you remember, of things that we couldn't reconcile, we couldn't understand about the difference in the models. We made a recommendation similar to what some of you have voiced today, that it's big, it's a high recommendation. So we were comfortable with 5%, even though we still had a lot of questions. We may be still in the same boat, but not in some way, but we have learned a lot in this year, and we did our due diligence with the RFP. We interviewed how many, I don't know, many firms. We've settled with Willis. Willis has done a fabulous job and provided us with both the rate indication as well as the modeling work, which I think has brought our knowledge level up significantly for our book. I feel that we've done our job as far as to this point. We have always, there's always this kind of project leads to more questions. We have a lot of answers, but it also leads to more questions where we can always do more, and that's possible if the board so wishes us to pursue this further. And I think that's invaluable for the TWIA policyholders as well, to dig into more of these data issues. I'm personally feeling that we could turn this over to the board as is and say, this is our recommendation. We have a plus 26 indication. I don't remember the commercial, 41, 44, something, for them to take action as they see fit, whether it's the 5% that we recommended previously, or say again, or 0 or more. But we have an indication, at least at this point in time, that's the best that we can provide to them to take under advisement with the other things they're considering. So that's my feeling at the moment. We think we've done our job to this point, unless we are asked to go further.
Debbie, can I just add to that real quick?
Yes.
I agree with everything you said, especially about over the past year, we've spent a lot of time learning a heck of a lot about TWIA and how these rate indications are put together. And so with that said, I actually feel better about the rate needs that are being presented. And as I mentioned before, plus 20, plus 40 are very healthy. And I actually would be in favor of going higher than the 5. up to maybe 10, and 5% would barely keep up with the increase in the costs of just doing business, inflation. And if we really want to start digging into the actual rate need, you actually have to go higher than that. And so I would be in favor of maybe even going higher. So thanks.
I believe the motion as it stands would allow for that.
Well, I think it's a +0 though today, right? Georgia, was that true?
Did you say? I'm sorry.
0.
Yes, there's no recommendation on rate other than to move, accept the report as presented and move it forward.
Could that be revised slightly to say the recommendation is the indications as presented from Willis that our committee has that we not approve, that's not the word, but we are supportive of the indications as they have been developed with the data improvements to date?
No, because I think there's more work that can be done. I think the board has a right to see what Willis has come up with in this short period of time. And certainly it was news to me that the lack of data or not using the data in our reinsurance purchase in our 1 in 100 year storm could have this kind of an impact. We certainly have never discussed that at the board. And so I think the board should have the benefit of our year's worth of work, and most particularly the last couple of months of work, and become aware of this. Maybe the board members are already aware, but I would be surprised. And they can then digest it and determine what the next step is, whether it is a rate increase or whether it is tweaking our data so that we in fact get a more accurate and transparent picture of the rate need by using the data and the actual policies that we are insuring.
Debbie, this is Steve Alexander. I also think that, I'm sorry. I think we also ought to pursue what David suggested earlier, looking a little bit closer at opening protection and what the impact would be of assuming 50%, 75%, 100% opening protection. Right now, the models are running opening protection with over 80% unknown. And I think it would be a good idea to see what the impact would be on the PML and also on the AAL of running the models at different levels of opening protection. And I don't think that would take very much time.
I agree with that, but at the same time, I don't think it should hold us back from recommending an increase.
Well, I mean, if we in Willis's prior report, they estimated that assuming 100% opening protection would reduce the AAL and PML, I believe, by 15 to 25%. That's a very significant number, and that's in their prior report. So a significant range. So I think that we ought to at least have that number or those numbers before we proceed.
We may need the board to weigh in on this since it's the length of time that we have been pursuing the data improvement. I agree with you, Steve, that I hope the board goes that direction of getting the information. I agree it would be worthwhile. At this point, for their meeting coming up, I think that presenting what Willis has done to date, which I think is planned, I believe it's planned that they would present to the board, and then the board can advise us if they wish us to pursue this and wish ask Willis to pursue this on our behalf. I think that would be probably the way we should go at this time. So for recommendation to the board for the upcoming meeting, I guess that would be, we can phrase that however we wish. We have a motion standing. So if anyone wants to amend that, I guess we could amend it or ask for an amendment if we think that would fit better.
This is Steve Alexander again. I think we ought to get an indication from Willis as to how long it would take to rerun the models based on what David suggested, just to see what the savings would be in the AAL, the PML, the reinsurance, and what the effect would be, the overall effect would be on the rate indications. I don't think it would take very much time.
And you're saying that, Stephen, with just making the assumption from where we are today at 80-20 to 75-25, 50-50, et cetera, is that?
Ron Valenta here. When does our current reinsurance contracts, treaties renew?
They renew on June 1st of 2021.
Okay, so they're not a 1/1 renewal then.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And so the question, I guess, to Willis again about this, the openings, what is that? Can you give us any indication on what you think the impact of this could be? Because if I understand it today, we're saying 80% of the book doesn't have openings. We're making an assumption that that is an incorrect number. It should be something.
Yeah, I think it would decrease the results by, like, depending on how big you want to expand the risk to, be considered with opening protection. If you give us the criteria, for example, like everything in this region should have opening protection, it wouldn't be too time consuming to rerun that.
Yeah, I think just to jump in, I think if we were to assume all of Seaward territory had opening protections, I think that could be delivered within the next 24, 48 hours. I think if we go beyond that into Inland 1 and assumptions on Inland 2, that may take a little more time. Jay, do you think the rest of this week is fair? Would it be done by the board meeting or no?
If that is the only thing we're changing, then
Yeah,
assuming no technical issues.
Yeah, so you're doing it by territory rather than working with staff over the next week or two to make selections on individual policies. It's easier, Steve, I think, given the time constraints, to do it by territory, being Seaward, Inland 1, Inland 2.
So if you amended your report then to include that information with the assumptions kind of moving and letting the board have the benefit of that information, if we went from 80% to 50 or to 25 or whatever, you could present that and the impact it would have on the various categories that Stephen identified: reinsurance, PML, AAL, rate indication, et cetera.
We could do that if staff were to approve the assumptions that we make, yes. The staff or the committee, yeah.
So this is Steve Alexander again. I think we ought to go with what David mentioned earlier, 25, 50, 75, and 100%.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Alan.
Could I just jump in real quick, Steve, on
Sure.
that? We would need to know which location. So I guess we could arbitrarily take 25% of a random sampling. Is that what you're saying, Steve?
Yeah, that would be acceptable.
So this is Dave. In the way I think about this, and the reason I even brought this up is, I keep going back to, we have a plus 20 something % rate need indicated for residential. If we went with a ridiculous assumption like 100% of the risks have this attribute, and that plus 20 1% or whatever it is moved to plus 15%, then we should feel very comfortable in recommending a plus 10% rate need to the board.
Mm-hmm.
So it has less to do with which actual locations have, the coverings and more of the sensitivity around this secondary risk characteristic within the CAT models and how it moves the rate indication.
Ron Walenta here. I'm not sure of what, since I'm really not in this committee, but I think David's points are well made.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't think that's our motion though right now, so we'd have to either vote on the motion presented or see if it could be modified.
Just a quick question to, I guess, TWIA staff for this additional work. This would not then be possible. It would not be possible for us to meet again, obviously, in time to have a look at this before the board meeting.
I would defer to council as to whether there's any meeting notice requirements,
Yeah.
but obviously we can send out the information as soon as it's available.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. King. Jerry was quicker to trigger than I was on the unmute button, but we would need to go through the notice requirements. So we do not have time to have another meeting of this committee before next Tuesday's meeting.
Right. Okay. I just want to verify that. It would have to be a different presented. This additional data would have to be, or additional findings would have to be presented at a subsequent board meeting.
Well, it could be presented to the board next Tuesday, right, Debbie? We could just ask.
I don't know. I mean, that was my question. So Mike, you're saying it would not meet the notice requirements.
Yes, we don't have time to properly call and notice a meeting of this committee and hold it between now and December 7th, 8th.
But even to present updated data, we would not have, I mean, I guess even that, without even coming through this committee, we would have issues with that as well.
No, I mean, the additional information could be prepared and forwarded to the board as part of the material.
Okay, got it.
The deadlines, there don't apply now. There are requirements in the law for TWIA's own rate analysis to be posted with certain deadline of, I think, 14 days. So any information, couldn't be in that category, but you could have some sort of supplemented report from Willis.
Okay.
Jerry, Jim, if you see it differently, weigh in, please, or David.
I don't see it differently with respect to the notice requirements, and we've had posted both the TWIA staff rate indications and the Willis indications for sufficient time to meet in my view, to meet the statutory requirements for posting prior to a meeting.
So
I'm happy. This is Georgia. I'm happy to amend my motion if Steve is willing to second to include this additional modeling.
I second that motion.
Just to clarify in the motion, Georgia, and we may need to hear it again. There was nothing in that motion to preclude the board from taking rate action. There's nothing, we're not recommending a number.
Not recommending a number, and we're passing the report in its entirety with the additional modeling to the board for their action.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a clarification? Isn't it this board's job to recommend a number to the board? This committee's job?
Yeah.
Like, it seems very vague for us to hand them this report and just say, we're good with it.
I mean, I believe that was our charge. Now, I guess we don't really, I looked back on the minutes and I know our responsibility was to do this search for the firm, which we did, hire Willis Towers, which we did, receive the report, which we have, and then from that to make a recommendation if we choose to. I believe that for a rate indication, if we choose to, right? So it's, I don't know. If we don't make that recommendation, I don't know what the board, how they would view that. I
This
don't
is
know.
Steve
They're
Alexander.
obligated to do it either.
I think we still have a lot of outstanding issues with opening protection, what the impact of that would be. Willis's prior report said that would have a 15 to 25% impact on the AAL and the reinsurance, or the PML, which would have a huge impact on the reinsurance purchase. We could be down to single digits on the rate increase with 75 or 100% opening protection. So I think it's premature to make a recommendation at this point until we actually see what the effect of rerunning the models would be.
So Willis, do y'all agree that if we had this at a 75%, let's say, opening, it could bring it, the indication on the residential side down to single digits? Is that a correct generalization?
I think it's
I know you don't
very
want to say that, but
yeah, because we'd have to model it and then plug it into the rate indication spreadsheet. So I think that's difficult to determine. But I will say we're happy to do that work. But I would limit the amount of work given the time frame we're looking up. We have a week to do this. So Debbie, I guess I'd just suggest that we limit the model runs to 2, if that's possible, because beyond that, it would not get done by the end of the week.
What would those 2 be?
So 1 would be assuming everything in Seaward has opening protections. And then 2 would be potentially anything in Inland 1 also has it. That's another way to look at it. I think making that assumption that Seaward has it is reasonable. I think that can be done in a matter of days. I think 1 more run is possible to get the results by Monday to deliver it to the board.
so it's 100% in both categories, you're saying?
That's my suggestion. It takes a lot more time to go in there and dig out individual risks to make an assumption. Now, if the board said we want 1 with Seaward 100%, and the next one is Seaward at 50, I think that's reasonable. I think we could do that. Or potentially 100 at Seaward and partial in Inland. I think that's possible. But again, if we're talking about 25%, 50%, 75%, that's a tremendous amount of work to be done in a week.
So I know there is a motion already on the floor, so I'm not making a motion here, but a potential motion we could make, I think, and this might be for the lawyers to decide, but could we do a motion for a specific increase subject to the work that Willis is doing this week, indicating that that's still appropriate? Meaning if it's still, if we were to recommend a +10, if the Willis work supported a +10, that would then be the recommendation that goes to the board next week.
Point of order, you can't consider 2 motions at the same time.
I understood. I'm just asking the question if that's.
Council will let you know that. But I think you have to deal with the first one to go to yours.
Again, I wasn't trying to make a motion.
To answer, this is Mike, to answer your question, Mr. Federley, if Ms. Neblett wanted to amend her motion in that manner, I think that would be permitted. So I think, with me having answered your question, I guess your question becomes, Ms. Neblett, would you be willing to amend your motion in that way?
I would not.
And so as I understand it, the motion on the floor has 2 parts, and I'm not sure if there's a third. The first part is that the resolution is that the committee accepts the report of Willis and forwards it to the board, and the committee makes no recommendation to the board regarding action regarding rates at this time. The third element I'm not sure of is whether Ms. Neblet's motion is intended to include a recommendation to the board that the Willis Group be retained to do additional work. I didn't quite understand that, Ms. Neblet.
Third part of my motion is that they do an analysis of covering seaward and inward at a percentage that is reasonable to deliver to the board by the board meeting.
Okay. So that is not a recommendation to the board. The third element of the motion is that Willis work in the days between now and the board meeting to deliver some more granular analysis, some more detail to the board regarding the secondary modifier issue with some additional assumptions about what structures have these protections and what structures don't.
That's correct.
Thank you.
This is Steve Alexander. I wonder if we could just simplify that and assume that all of the properties in Seaward and Inland 1 are 100% compliant with TWIA's underwriting requirements of opening protection and window protection. That would simplify it to one run instead of two.
And Steve, you're saying that just to try to determine the range we're working with. Is that right? That would be the most extreme.
Yes, that would give us a range, and then we would see what the overall impact would be on the AAL, the 100-year PML, the reinsurance buy, and the rate indications.
Excuse me, may I ask a question, Ms. King?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander, I think you said that, and please listen up here, Mr. Murphy. I think you said that we should assume that 100% of the properties insured are compliant with TWIA's underwriting requirements. I would already assume that. Mr. Murphy, can you help me be less confused?
I think the difference here, Mr. Perkins, is that the current underwriting requirements in Seaward, for example, require opening protections on homes constructed to the most recent building codes. A home built in 2015 should have exterior opening protections, and it actually has been modeled that way in the results that we've seen today. The question is a home built in 1980, whether or not that has opening protections. Even if it's located in Seaward, there's no underwriting requirement today that that home have opening protections unless the openings have been repaired or altered or replaced since the WP8 requirement was put into place.
Right.
So
those homes that don't have the protective, those homes that are old enough or grandfathered and do not have the protective coverings do in fact meet our underwriting criteria, do they not? That's why they're with us.
That's correct.
That's right.
So we're assuming what is already a fact. If we assume that all the property we insure is insurable by us, that's where I'm getting confused.
Well, this is Steve Alexander again. To determine the range, can't we just run the models assuming all properties, regardless of age, have opening protection? The Seaward areas having opening protection, and the Inland 1 areas having glazed window protection. I think that's the way it's phrased in the underwriting manual. That would give us the extreme range of potential impact.
Thank you. So Mr. Alexander has sought to modify the third element to Ms. Neblet's motion with a little more specific instruction in an effort to simplify the work of the modeling consultant we're using. Ms. Neblet, is that adjustment an adjustment that you would accept as an amendment to your motion?
That's fine, because many of those older homes, both in Galveston and in this area, went through storms and have been updated.
All right, Ms. King, do you need,
Yes.
you need anything else before moving forward on this item?
Yeah.
I don't, Carice, did you have a comment?
What was so what did we end up on the third? My apologies. I'm still third element now of the motion.
My understanding is that as modified by Mr. Alexander, the third element of the motion is that now between today and the time of the board meeting, that Willis Towers Watson do some additional work with the models to incorporate assumptions regarding secondary modifiers that involve things such as window coverings and glazing, with assumptions that the entire population of TWIA risk meets the current standard for window covering. That's what I understood.
So I guess I have issues with two parts of that motion, right? The no action on the rate. I feel like we have an opportunity here, and in spite of the fact that we do still have some additional information on openings, I would say that there is some level of a rate indication that would be appropriate for our committee to refer to the board. So that I'm not comfortable with that portion of the motion. And now this newly revised third part of the motion, I think it would be an incorrect assumption to make that all of our business written by TWIA satisfies this opening requirement, if that's now the gist of the third part of that motion. So
I think that the point of that is that if we assume they all have protection, that would make the indication go as low as it could go with this additional modeling. So it would give us a range to, it wouldn't be correct. You're right. It wouldn't be reality, but it would give us a range to say that, well, it's now, plus 12. So we know at least we have that much.
Okay.
I think that was the point.
Okay.
Rather than saying it is plus 12, it's like that would be the low end of the range.
Yeah, not to mislead the board to think that this is the absolute.
Right.
We're certain that all our policies meet this opening requirement. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just one more thought before we vote, and then I'll ask you to take a roll call vote, Mr. Perkins. We won't have an advantage of seeing what this lower end of the range is and making a determination in our rate recommendation if we come up with a number. That's where I'm stumbling on that. I'm okay with saying the board, if it comes out plus 12, that the board take that into their they can take that under advisement of approving a rate change based on wherever this falls out. That's another way of looking at it. So with that, Mr. Perkins,
Debbie.
do a roll, unless there's
Alan,
any comments.
It looks like Alan has his hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I just
Sure.
have a question just to clarify. If we're going to make these assumptions, we need to be clear whether the committee wants us to adjust the premium as well. Because if you're assuming opening protections on a dwelling, that insurer would get a premium credit as well. So we need to work with staff to potentially adjust the premium if that's what the committee wants to do.
Are we doing that already in the ones that we have found?
We didn't adjust the premium because they've already obtained a premium credit. But if we're going to make further assumptions on all of the properties, I think at least for the rate indications, we would need to consider potentially adjusting, offering a credit to all of those.
Right.
So just need clarification from staff. And
Are there credits from any opening protection? So if you have plywood on your doors and windows, is that a credit?
So Debbie, I can address that if you are okay. That we provide building code credits for homes where the original construction in specific areas is built to the specified building codes. The building code specifications are very broad and cover a lot of different aspects of the home, one of which is opening protections. And so if a home is certified by the issuance of a WPA certificate as having been built to that code in that area, then they get the corresponding premium credit. That's for original construction. There's a much smaller retrofit credit that's also available for homes that have kind of installed these things after original construction. I don't think that just replacing windows, for example, in Inland 1 would be sufficient to justify the retrofit credit, because I believe it applies to the entire structure. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just what I recall off the top of my head. So original construction, these homes should be getting a building code credit for the entirety of the structure. There's no credit specifically in our rates for opening protections.
Okay, so that means that wouldn't apply. We'd be fine to just model on or make the loss assumption. Correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So Alan, does that satisfy? You have any other follow-up on that?
No, I mean, we can model anything that the committee and staff wants us to do. I just wanted to make sure that if staff wants us to adjust the premium for the IBC and the IRC standards, we would need to adjust that premium, the premium base in the rate indications. So we're happy to do whatever the committee decides.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, personally, I would like to see it without that adjustment, and then possibly if there should be, I mean, you can work with TWIA staff to determine what something reasonable on the premium side, but maybe show that separately so we can kind of see the effect of both.
Sure. Yeah, if we get some direction from staff, we're happy to do that.
Okay. All right.
Can I just clarify with respect to, so we're making an assumption about those homes for which we don't have any information on opening protections in seaward or inland. And the question on the floor is whether, if we make an assumption about those, we should grant them the credit that they would have if they abided by the entire building code assumption.
I don't know that we have.
Well, it's considering that, right, in this analysis, right, the resulting premium credit for that assumption of proper opening protection. Do you go that extra step in this adjusted review?
The results that you see today include every policy that is receiving a building code credit or the retrofit credit. It also includes every policy for which we were able to find a WPI 8 showing that the exterior openings have been replaced to the current codes. So I believe that the only difference between what we're doing now and this notional exercise of modeling everything with the 100% exterior opening protections would be if there were homes that had replaced their windows but hadn't obtained a WPI 8 for it, we would be including those. Unfortunately, they might not be eligible anymore if they didn't get a WPI 8 for the alterations in their home. And I assuming that this was more of a theoretical exercise in what would happen if we replaced all of the exterior openings on these homes. But for homes that we know through the WPI 8 process or through the original construction that qualify for this opening protection, they are already included in the model results that we've seen today.
Yeah, that's right. This is a notional exercise. Exactly right. Because we can't end up giving credits. We can't take this a step further.
Mm-hmm. And we don't know that.
So what percentage book of business on the residential side is included?
What was
Do you
your
have that
last
number, Jay? Do you have the number of properties on the residential that has opening protections? I don't have that number. We can get it if we don't have it.
Sorry,
this is Steve Alexander.
Yeah.
It's less than 20%.
Yeah, 17% on the residential and nothing really on the commercial.
Jade, I believe it's 22.5%. I'm looking at Exhibit 13 on the data audit report. That's the RMS number.
Yes.
And I think one other thing to point out is the 77.5% of the risks that are being modeled as unknown on the opening protection, RMS itself assumes that 40 to 50% of those risks do actually have opening protection.
Okay, so Jim, you said that RMS is already making that assumption?
When we report values as unknown, the models assume a distribution.
Okay.
So it's not assuming that none of them have opening protections. Depending on the age of the structure, it's assuming that either 40 or 50% of them have opening protections.
So that's already factored in then to some extent, this plus 26 and plus 44. Beyond the 18 to 22% that we know to be the case. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And by this assumption, though, by this practice, we already assume that TWIA's book have better protections compared to the industry average. Because my understanding, the unknown means the industry average.
Yes. So we are explicitly recognizing the locations that have opening protection for the model to recognize that.
Yeah, and Jade mentioned that on slide 6 of the presentation about unknown and how it's treated in the models.
So the gap, if you want to call it a gap, may not be as drastic as one might have first thought at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, this is Steve Alexander again. Jade, are you confident that improved data or realistic assumptions on wind-borne protections would reduce the PML by 15 to 25%? Or is it something less than that?
I think it would.
Without adjusting the premium yet.
On the RMS side, at least error is a little bit less impactful.
Well, and keep in mind, we already, that was, from the original, we're already down the 1 in 100 year on average down 8% from what we've done thus far.
Well, Steve Alexander again, I think it still would be worth doing if it's not going to cost a lot and it's not going to take a lot of time. I think it would be worth doing just to see what the bottom end of the range would be.
And I don't disagree with that, Stephen, that it's worth doing. For me, though, it still speaks to the fact of recommending no rate action. For me, I'm uncomfortable with. I'm feeling more and more confident about the numbers that have been presented to us today by Willis Towers, and that from that plus 26 and plus 44, our committee has enough information to make a rate indication recommendation rather to our board.
Yeah, I agree with you, Clarice, and it does it does seem a little strange to me for this committee not to be recommending something to the board.
Okay, maybe we could get a roll call vote for the motion. Mr. Perkins, unless somebody has anything else to add, I think we'll do the roll call vote.
Thank you, Ms. King. Mr. Schrader, how do you vote?
No.
Ms. Morrison?
No.
David Futterlieb?
No.
Marilyn Hamilton?
Yes.
Stephen Alexander?
Sorry, yes.
Georgia Neblett?
She must be on mute.
it appears she was having some issues
Ms.
unmuting.
Neblett,
It
if you're
looks
voting
like
yes,
she-
just raise your hand. I can see you on the video. Just raise. All right, Ms. Neblett votes yes. The only person who's not voted is the chair, Debbie King. How do you vote, Debbie King?
I vote yes.
All right, so I see 4 votes in favor of the motion and 3 votes against the motion. So the motion passes by a vote of 4-3.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Could you please read that back to us now so we are sure what, and I'd like to just clarify timing and how this will play out over the next week.
All right, so your first request is for me to read the motion we just voted to approve back. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, the motion had 3 parts. The first part was that the committee accepts the report and forwards it to the board. The second part is that the committee makes no recommendation to the TWIA board regarding action on rate at this time. And the third is a direction to Willis and to the TWIA staff to work in the coming days to do some additional modeling analysis that will better refine the data inputs regarding secondary modifiers in order to try to get additional model output for presentation to the board at the meeting on the 8th.
Yes. Could we also entertain a motion to have the board advise us of how they wish us to proceed? We've kind of laid out a lot of open ends here. So would that be something we should put in a motion, or would that just be assumed?
We can do that. I think 2 things will happen at the meeting. I think that you will be given an opportunity to speak to the board on behalf of the committee, Ms. King. And I think you'll have the opportunity to do that at that time. And failing that, or in addition to it, of course, Mr. Pollock and staff will be there to make sure the board knows that the committee is interested to hear any additional direction or instruction that might be given.
Okay, very good. I know this was a split decision. The committee members, I feel both sides strongly. I'm feeling like we need to see the numbers, and then we can maybe make a more informed recommendation. But based on the board's direction, I'm sure we will be meeting again in the not too distant future. I'm very appreciative to all the work from TWIA staff and Willis and all committee members. This has been a pretty interesting project and of great benefit. And I know it took a lot of effort and time from many people to get to this point. So thank you very much for everyone. Any other discussion before we adjourn?
Ms. Chair, you want us to work with staff on assumptions. I just want to be clear, are we doing 2 model runs? So it's my understanding 1 model run will be 100% in Seaward with opening protections. Model run 2 is 100% in Seaward plus 100% in Inland 1. No changes in premium, so no credits on any of the policies. It'll be the way it is today. And we will deliver PML determination, so new modeling, the impact on reinsurance, and also the new rate indication. Is that correct?
Yes. If there is an impact to premium that's reasonable, if you could keep that separate or show that separately, I think that would be, if you go down, but maybe in the sake of time, we just leave that out because we are just trying to get the bottom end of the range, which would be credit. Yeah, so that's good.
Okay, we'll do that.
And this report,
that sounds reasonable.
This report will come to both the committee and the board, right? We'll make sure that our committee gets it as well as the board gets it.
Sure. I think we will target, Jade, or you think we can deliver this back to the committee and Mr. Fadden by the end of the week, or you think Monday is more realistic?
The end of the week, but possibly Monday. Possibly,
Okay.
if we run into anything.
Jim Murphy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the credit only comes if you meet all the building code. It isn't specific just to openings.
That is correct.
Correct.
So the premium credit may not be quite as relevant as we think it might.
I would even go so far to say that there is no premium impact to just changing the exterior openings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good clarification.
Okay, and Willis, do you need a new contract to do this additional work, or would it be already as part of the contract that we have?
We're happy to do the work without an additional engagement. That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. That's nice. Thank you. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? I know it's been we've been on the phone a long time, so sorry for no breaks. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, if all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting
Aye.
adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good job. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.